Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special webinar. Experts have endorsed crowdsource funding equity raising. I'm Peter Towers, the Managing Director of ESS BIZTOOLS, and I'm very proud today to be able to bring to you representatives from 4 of the intermediary companies to talk to you about their experience relative to crowdsource funding equity raising. And also we have the CEO of a small proprietary company who has been able to finalise investment raising from crowdsource funding equity raising. I hope you enjoy this webinar. If you have any questions, please send us an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. I now want to introduce you to the CEO of that small proprietary company that did raise capital utilising crowdsource funding. His name is Ben Koyman. He's the CEO of Endeavour Brewing Company from Argyle Street, The Rocks in Sydney. Good morning, Ben. How are you today?
Very well, Peter. Thank you.
Ben, you're the CEO of a company that's been able to raise capital utilising the federal government's new legal process called crowdsource funding equity raising. How have you found this process?
Overall, really exciting and really positive and very successful. So it was a long process, but really rewarding, and we're really excited about not just what it raised during the process, but the actual benefits of it going forward.
Can you tell us a bit about Endeavour Brewing Company?
Yeah, sure. We started in 2010 as a virtual beer company. We had our own brand, recipes, and we started talking to farmers down in Tassie and Victoria about using all Australian ingredients and making beer much like wine. So looking at the best of the crop every year, tweaking our recipes every year to suit those ingredients and producing a set of sort of vintage harvest beers. Since then, we then opened our own brew house in the Rocks in 2016, the Endeavour Tap Rooms and Brew Bar. But all 8.5 years we've been shipping our beers nationally through a lot of production through our partner brewers and a little bit of export, of which we're ramping up this year.
Okay, so what were your targets in the shareholding?
We set ourselves a capital raising window of between $1 and $3 million. We actually had a preemptive period with our existing shareholders as per our constitution. So we opened up that capital raising to them first, of which we raised $695,000. So that then changed the window for the crowdfunding part of $305,000 to $2.305 million.
And how much did you raise from crowdsource funding?
We ended up with $556,900. $556,700. So yeah, we got above the minimum, well above the minimum, about 83% above the minimum of $305,000.
That's good. And how many new shareholders did you acquire?
Yeah, we acquired 579 new shareholders. That's on a base of, we previously had about 40 shareholders. Our company was started with 3 blokes and 35 mates. So we actually did crowdfunding before there was actually a term back in 2010. I was literally inviting mates to a pub to try a beer and saying who wants to be in on a beer company. And yeah, now we've literally last Monday we settled on the share offer with Equitise, and on the Tuesday everyone got their holding statements. So now we have an active database of 608 shareholders.
Good. So that capital raising you did earlier that you referred to would have been under Section 708 of the Corporations Act.
Correct.
Yes, and it's still a very important section to work in conjunction with crowdsource funding.
Yeah, so any direct shareholders we still have to stay under that 50 shareholder cap to remain a private company. We've got, probably a roadmap to get to a public company. But at the moment, the cost of compliance and extra diligence is a little bit prohibitive to a company our size. But now that we do have 608 shareholders, we'll be doing all our normal reporting. We will be doing an annual report, etc. But we're not quite a public company yet.
No. How long did the listing take for crowdsource funding? Did you take the full 90 days or was it less?
No, we went at about 60 days.
Okay.
And again, it was just because our total capital raise had a 3-month window after we closed it to existing shareholders. So we did the existing shareholders over a week. We then spent a week putting in that investment into our numbers, etc. And then we opened the crowdfunding round on November 30. Had a little private period for people, associates, staff. And then we went full public in the middle of December and closed on the 13th of February.
Very good. How many directors have you got?
We've got 3 directors. It's the original 3 blokes. So yeah, three directors. We are looking at refreshing our board, possibly getting an independent director in, and another significant shareholder maybe joining the board. So we'll go to sort of 4 or 5 directors going forward.
Did you have any pressure from any of the new shareholders to have a say in the appointment of a director, or were they happy to go with the status quo?
Oh, they were happy to go with the status quo. The biggest investor outside the existing shareholders came in at 100,000. They've got a nice little stake in the business. Percentage terms, it's not a huge stake. So they're just happy to be involved in a beer company. There's other benefits for all our shareholders now. We've formed a shareholders club called the Endeavour Crew. Okay. And depending on how much they invested, they're one of 3 tiers within that club. And they get a bit of merchandise and some discounts and some ongoing little goodies going forward, and which I think is important and really exciting to harness, hopefully, their enthusiasm in supporting their own beer company.
Some companies that are trying to raise capital as crowdsource funding are doing that. They're introducing some fringe benefits, if you like. Do you think that's important?
Oh, 100%. I think, especially for people in our space, which are consumer brands, they want to be something, not just a shareholder and, bottom drawer investment. I think they want to be, quite engaged and feel part of the brand. And definitely then we are hoping that they'll act as ultra engaged brand ambassadors out there. So especially for consumer brands, I think you need to give them something special, something exclusive. It doesn't always have to be free. It might just be first access, or it might be, and we're going to do one every year, we're going to do an exclusive shareholders beer. So they're going to actually be invited. We're going to have an annual general mashing rather than an AGM, and we're all going to get them together to brew a beer, have a few drinks, and then a few weeks later we're going to bottle or can off that beer, send it to them, and they're going to get access, or exclusive access, to buy a little bit more until the batch is all allocated. But yeah, I think for consumer brands especially, whether it be maybe a clothing brand and they want to do an exclusive shirt for their shareholders, or a watch company I saw, they're going to design an exclusive watch for their shareholders. So I think that's really important. Okay.
Do some of the shareholders turn up at the Rocks at your outlet there?
Yeah, well, we've already had half a dozen turn up who we weren't previously shareholders. A couple turned up before the settlement period. So we, of course, gave them the discount early. So we offer them a discount to come to the Endeavour Tap Rooms and Brew Bar Monday to Thursdays when we're a little bit less busy. They can get discount on the beers, obviously with responsible service of alcohol, always a high consideration. So yeah, they're definitely now can come to our home, and indeed come to their home, because they're a fully fledged shareholder.
Okay, Ben, the people who are going to watch this recording are either accountants, bookkeepers, or business advisors in one group, and the other group are people like yourself. They are currently running small businesses or medium-sized enterprises, obviously with turnovers under $25 million. Would you recommend this process to them? Would you recommend, firstly, that accountants and advisors get an understanding of it so they can help their clients? And would you think it's beneficial for small, medium-sized businesses?
Well, 100%. I think very important for accountants and advisors to understand what it all means. It's a new way of getting capital. It's not an easy way, and it's not a cheap or dodgy way of getting capital. It's a fully fledged, very sophisticated, very well thought out program that obviously vetted by ASIC. So I think those advisors and accountants definitely you need brands that have got some good plans, some upward trajectories. They know exactly what they do with that extra capital. It's not just I'll put the head out and get some money and trust us. You've got to really put out a fully fledged offer document, which is an ASIC template, and it's got a lot of caveats in there that you need to obviously honour. So, and then for the business side, definitely we were going to raise capital this year. Late last year, 2018, and we were looking at private equity, sophisticated investors, that wholesale market for that big amount we were chasing. But then I'd been watching crowdsourced equity funding internationally, and then obviously the first public company started doing it in early 2018. When that new legislation came that if you raised less than 3 million, you could stay as a private company, that's when we instantly just changed tack and went to that model for our second part of the capital raising after the existing shareholders.
Okay. And since then, of course, that legislation's now got it that you can raise up to $5 million as a private company, and you can do that every 12 months if the market will support you and you want to raise more money. So I think it's very exciting times.
Yeah, I think you've got to be fair on your valuations as well. So as I said, it's not the cheap and easy and dodgy way of getting money. It is a very sophisticated model. But if you've got a good story, and we believe we had a pretty good story, we raised 1.25 million.
Very good. You did mention just earlier, I meant to come back to it, that one of your shareholders put in $100,000. Was that as part of the original capital raise under Section 708, or is he a sophisticated investor?
No, he's a sophisticated investor that we had a sort of second degree of separation to. So popped through the platform, the Equitise platform. I can remember it was a Thursday afternoon, and I instantly rang Arthur at Equitise and said, "Who's this guy?" Because we don't see all the details initially. And he said, new customer, a new client to our platform, and we didn't know the name. So he's on my to call list now that we've settled. Get him, see how actively involved he wants to be. The existing shareholders, there was actually a couple of bigger investments than that. But he was the biggest, I guess, crowd investor.
Yeah, and just for clarification for the people watching this video, retail investors, who are people not described as sophisticated investors, have got an investment limit of $10,000 per company.
Correct.
Per annum. And that's really why I picked you up on that, because people listening may have thought that a company could put $100,000, but they can only put that amount in to a crowdsourced funding company if that person's a sophisticated investor. So that's great.
Or wholesale. Yeah. Our average investment parcel was about $900.
Right.
So that gives you a sort of a feel. 579 new investors combined to contribute $556,000. So yeah, it was about $900 average investment.
Okay, Ben, you've got a very interesting story. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. And obviously our viewers, who are going to be people from all over Australia and accountants and business operators, all the best in the future for Endeavour Brewing Company. And obviously anyone that's watching this that's in Sydney, go down to the Rocks and find the Endeavour facility. What did you actually call it?
Endeavour Tap Rooms and Brew Bar. We're on Argyle Street in the Rocks. You can't miss us. We're right in the middle of the busy part of the Rocks on the pedestrian mall. 100 metres from the harbour, and 5 of the 8 brews beers are brewed on site and always changing.
Okay, thanks very much and have a great day. Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, Good morning, Ben. How are you? The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was the crowdsourced funding scorecard. We have this scorecard. It is available on our website within the crowdsourced funding Learn More segment, where you can have a look at the performance of the individual intermediaries. I now want to introduce you to Matt Pinter. Matt is the Managing Director of Billfolder, but he's also the Chairman of the Crowdfunding Institute of Australia, CFIA. Good afternoon, Matt. How are you? Welcome to this recording, which we're doing for accountants and small businesses and medium-sized businesses all over Australia. How are you today?
Thanks good, mate. Good. Thanks for having me on.
You're the chair of the Crowdfunding Industry Association of Australia. What's the expectations of crowdsource funding in Australia? What is it?
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's a really early stage but exciting time for the industry. It's not entirely new, this concept of crowdfunding particularly, and also the equity stream to crowdfunding, but it's very early days for a new regime to bring that to everyday Australians. But if I can just take a little step back, CFIA is a membership organisation for all types of crowdfunding. People are often confused between the equity side of crowdfunding, which is very much a fact-driven financial product, and the well-known or promoted rewards and donation-based crowdfunding. So those may have an interest, certainly in the terms of the reward product pre-sale model for accountants and small business, but really the exciting and innovative area and new outcome from a fairly drawn-out and lengthy process with politics. But what we've got is a equity crowdfunding model which proprietary companies can use, and that's very much a game changer and early days. You can't really call it angel investing, but you can't really find a better way to quickly get people into the mindset of where that type of investment product fits. You know, it's not an IPO, but there's elements to it that are offering to the public. And really, what if you boil it back down, is you've taken an early stage company and given them access to a public market within a capped and a controlled regime for licensees. So, with the proprietary model, provided that the offer and the conditions are right, that's really accessible to your entire audience, even from an investment perspective, but also certainly for clients and businesses looking at scaling rapidly and having a really exciting prospect, that they could consider this as one of the channels for future funding.
Okay, very interesting. So who is the CFIA?
So the CFIA is, it's a good Aussie backstory, because it was really lots of individuals who were interested in the space who'd followed it. We had really the earliest regime for something like crowdfunding, which was a class order concession, which I'm sure, your background familiar. It wasn't particularly great, but it did allow some retail investors into early stage companies. And that process over 20 years, and then there were various government inquiries, led lots of people to be interested. And obviously there's also the other parts of crowdfunding which are really inspired by mobile phone adoption and by cloud computing and the access to broader audiences. So these forces really brought everyone to the realisation that there's going to be a lot of change and specialisations in this area. And we just put together a not-for-profit limited public company, limited by guarantee. So one member, one vote, and brought the parties together. And we've done lots of work with the ATO, with Fair Trading, ACCC, but also with members in terms of actually how to get a campaign off the ground and some of the things to think about. It's actually a lot harder than it looks. When it works, it's a beautiful thing indeed. But so some of that support network, but also to protect the future of the industry and to say, well, look, there are some quite big question marks in terms of there's any big change like this. So to try to actually bring the coalition of the willing, if you like, to doing it the right way and to preempt some of the the potential problems. Now, I'm not going to say we've solved everything, but there's a solid purpose there, and it's really volunteer based.
Okay.
But I think we've punched above our weight in a few areas and look to continue that.
Well, I'm sure on behalf of the people who are going to be watching these recordings, I would wish you well in this whole endeavour, because I think crowdsource funding is a very important component in the financing of small and medium-sized businesses. So your organisations are going to be in the driver's seat in making sure this occurs properly in Australia. So good luck in all your
cheers, mate. I
endeavours.
appreciate that. I'll just put in a little plug, if that's all right. We've got our annual conference videos coming out on the website soon. So in terms of giving back some of that learning and education materials, they'll be freely available, and I encourage people to jump on around about middle of next month to access that material and feel free to share it. And also to look to links for training guides on equity crowdfunding and upcoming various educational pieces or reference points, like even, have you heard of a crowdfunding accelerator? So there's quite a bit of action in this space, and certainly a good touch point is cfinstitute.org, which is the website, cfinstitute.org.
cfinstitute.org. Okay, that's very interesting. A colleague of mine was at your conference in December in Sydney and was very appreciative of the matters that were discussed and the discussions that were held. So obviously I would recommend to everyone watching this webinar that they take up your invitation to log on to that site and view that material. Because I think the more people know about how all this functions and works, the healthier this industry is going to be. And obviously the audience we've got is primarily accountants, bookkeepers and advisors, together with small business and medium-sized enterprise operators. And they need to know more about it to appreciate the role that the intermediaries have to play and other people.
Well, and there's certainly an opportunity there internationally in the UK. The crowdfunding industry represents about a third of the venture market. Yeah. So and look, I'd argue that their regulatory process was a bit rushed and has quite a few gaps compared to ours. So in terms of people with interesting growth clients or innovative companies, it's certainly something that I see as a progressive part of any consulting firm, be that financial services or marketing or video production. There's lots of different industries that interweave in this area, so it's exciting times. Yeah,
very exciting. So is the association happy with how crowdfunding has proceeded so far? Is there enough crowd interested, and is there enough companies interested in trying to raise capital?
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those things where the education for more than 65 years has been very much buyer beware, and there's a degree of, if you haven't got a particular product through a particular channel, that this is something that you should really worry about. And the particularly around equity crowdfunding, there are substantial statutory requirements to notify investors of you are looking at an alternative product here. It's not through the full regulatory process. So look, this is actually fully in line with my understanding of how this would roll out in Australia, but I think there were certain parts of the industry where there was the assumption of, if the shackles are off, everyone will turn up for the show. So I think the same thing happened in other parts of the crowdfunding fraternity, particularly with rewards campaigns. It's literally the proof of the pudding with the early adopters getting success, and then that creating a general momentum for the industry. From a regulatory perspective, again, I think there was an expectation that this was really unshackling a lot of pent-up demand, and that there was going to be sort of almost an explosion or uncontrollable set of circumstances to come from that, and that the rollout has been more in line with the way investors deal with real money transactions. So that's not to say that there isn't a potential for explosive momentum, but it comes off the back of very similar decision-making processes that, in my view anyway, that would apply in a lot of other marketplaces. So just literally saying crowd doesn't mean that you get one there. So there is room for mistakes to be made by the industry to cost the participants, but there's also plenty of upside, I think, for us now that we've actually gone past those perceptions into reality, that we can earn some more relief, whether that comes in the nature of the cap amount, or whether it comes in the nature of the how the documentary process needs to be drawn together, or the types of companies participate, that sort of thing. But yes, early days. So we'll look forward to some further discussions on that, and hopefully on the back of plenty of good news.
Thanks very much, Matt. I'm sure the accounting industry and the smaller and medium-sized business market do wish the intermediaries in particular every success in this endeavour, because I honestly believe, as an accountant, there are a lot of businesses out there that can benefit from crowdsourced funding, equity raising, and having a viable market and an infrastructure in place that can help them achieve that is very important. So congratulations on your association members' efforts so far, and we look forward to catching up maybe later in the year to see how everything's going, and hopefully there's going to be some good numbers and some good success stories that we're able to talk about.
No, absolutely. And I'll just leave you on one point, which is that that whilst the process involves fundraising, I think when it's done right, that you're actually dealing with the bigger issue for those growth businesses, which is connecting with customers or getting customer advocacy. So if we can actually connect those type of business opportunities, then we really will earn our spot quickly, I think. So
it's very important to have customer support all the time, not just when you're trying to raise capital, but I know what you're talking about. It's very important that businesses harness that group of people who, in effect, pay for their services, don't they? So if they're then prepared to become investors as well, that's very good, and will help those companies to survive and prosper in the future. So thanks very much for your time today, and I wish the Industry Association every success.
Cheers for that. Have a great day.
Have a great Good afternoon, Matt. How are you? Welcome to this recording, which we're doing for accountants and small businesses and medium-sized businesses all over Australia. How are you today?
Thanks for good, mate. Good. Thanks for having me on.
You're the sorry about that, but we're now moving to Matt Hines and James Kilby. Matt is the Managing Director of AgCrowd, and James is a co-founder of AgCrowd. Well, good afternoon, Jamie and Matt, our representatives from AgCrowd, who have joined us on this special webinar on crowdsourced funding equity raising. How are you, and what can you tell us about AgCrowd?
Yes, I'm Matt Hines. This is James Kilby. We are co-founders of AgCrowd, which is an equity crowdfunding platform specifically focusing on raising capital for companies in the agricultural and renewable energy sectors.
So why is equity capital appropriate for people in agriculture or energy?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a number of reasons. Firstly, innovation in the agricultural and renewable energy sectors is growing rapidly currently. There's a lot of ag tech, food tech, renewable energy companies and biotech companies all within our focus that are launching and seeking growth capital. A lot of these companies don't actually fit within traditional venture funding mandate, this is usually due to a misalignment of expertise or experience or sort of a investment period expectation or a growth expectation. So we see our model as really appropriate to add that sort of additional or additional sort of method of funding for the agricultural companies. Secondly, the sector is quite early stage, particularly agriculture, the digitised sector globally. We need a lot more funding going into this sector to make it digitised and to see the innovation really come to sort of bear its fruits. And we can actually match our equity crowdfunding with grant funding from the government and other forms of private funding.
Yeah, I think another aspect of the sector specifically is that naturally there's quite a lot of regional founders who are doing exciting things in the ag as well as renewable energy space. A lot of renewable energy projects are based out in the bush, but yeah, there's farmers and other people who are moving into sort of entrepreneurship through solving problems that they see on farm. And so naturally they can have a bit of a limited network, but because of their geographical isolation and even in the bigger centres like Armidale or Wagga Wagga, you're still limited compared to people who have got a foot in Melbourne or Sydney or Adelaide or Perth. So one thing we want to do is bridge that rural and urban gap. And we can somewhat be the sort of men on the ground in the big cities for these guys and give them a presence here. So that's one thing that we want to provide. On the other side, for people who are interested in investing, it's currently quite difficult to get behind sustainable initiatives. There's sort of growing discontent with government inaction over climate change. We've had fires and floods and droughts all over Australia in sort of the recent months and years. There's other things going on like the fish dying in the Murray-Darling River has been a big one recently. And people want to be able to take action and sort of have meaningful support of initiatives solving these problems. And that's one thing we think our platform can do. And people can go beyond donating money or rewards-based crowdfunding and actually hold a stake in the outcome of those projects.
Okay, so what's the power of AgCrowd's platform when it comes to the people in the agricultural industry or energy industries?
Yeah, so following on from what I was saying, I guess that focus on building an ecosystem and a community around these specific sectors can be really beneficial for those companies. So we want people to use AgCrowd's platform to be able to better connect with their investors while doing capital raising, and they can do this by targeting it, particularly towards potential customers. And we can run, targeted advertising at people that might use a new piece of software or hardware that's being funded, so that they're getting a double benefit. That not only are they getting capital to fund their development, they're actually acquiring customers at the same time. And while that's sort of an aspect of equity crowdfunding as a whole, we can sort of double down within our industry and be really focused on that. Another one is the exposure to that community that we're building. We want to have supporters that will regularly get behind these sorts of things, and so that will bring value to our platform. And on the flip side, it's a great tool for the companies to leverage their own networks. So it can be quite difficult to go around, especially in the regional parts of Australia, and ask your friends, your family, your business partners or acquaintances for a little bit of cash to support your venture. But if you can do it via a platform and you're slightly removed from it, there's not the same personal interaction and pressure, then that can be a really powerful way to get a bit of money in for a business. And then I guess our partnerships with appropriate providers of other services will be important too for companies using our platform. So someone's coming to us and they need to go on and get some legal advice or some accounting work done, we can try and give them sort of preferred partners or people that we think suit their type of company. So that, yeah, we really want to focus in on that community feel of the platform.
Okay, so what's AgCrowd's unique competitive advantage in the marketplace?
Our unique competitive advantage is definitely the combination of our sector specialisation, agriculture and renewable energy, as well as the stage at which we focus our investments on. So we actually, we're starting with ventures in agriculture and renewable energy, but we want to expand our offering all the way across the value chain. So not only will we do ventures, we'll do farm enterprises as well as renewable energy assets as well. And as James said, we're building a community of really passionate people for growing the agricultural and renewable energy sector innovation. And the power of our platform really lies in finding a company, say we're targeting a a company who's developing a technology for fruit farmers. We want to be able to target this campaign specifically to fruit farmers, that not only they can have the opportunity to invest, but so they can also have the opportunity to come in as a potential customer as well. Beyond this, we've developed a strong connectivity within the agriculture and renewable energy sectors, and we hope to add more value to the companies than just the funding. So we hope to provide introductions and facilitate collaborations and partnerships where we see fit. So that's really our unique competitive advantage.
Okay, now I know that your website is there, but it hasn't got any offers on it at present. When do you think that will be operational?
Yeah, so currently we've just got a landing page up. Our platform development is complete, and we're just sort of getting our first offer together to put that all up at the same time. Our goal at the moment, our timeline at the moment, is to have our first investment opportunity live within 1 month.
Okay, that's great.
Middle of April, yeah.
And how are you going with the crowd, the investors? You got people registering with you, so you have a database of potential investors?
Yeah, really good actually. We've been taking registrations for about 12 months now, and that's before our platform was up. So this landing page, as James was saying, and we've also been really connecting well at the events. We've just developed a huge presence there on both the company and the investor side. We had our own event, so we had our first, Feeding the Future of Aussie Food in October last year, and we'll seek to do quite a few more of those this year.
Okay, so good luck with this venture. I meant to also ask you, are you supporting agriculture and energy businesses all over Australia, irrespective of where they are?
Yeah, definitely. We want to help out all Australians, and we'll definitely look for sort of international expansion at some point as well. But for now, we've got an Australian focus for sure. Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Jamie and Matt. All the best in your venture, because I'm certain there's a lot of people in the agricultural industry in particular that could really do with some proactive assistance to help them sort out their financing problems within their businesses.
For sure.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Ben.
Good luck.
See you.
I'd now like to introduce you to Alan Crabb. Alan is the co-founder and CEO of BIZTOOls, a Melbourne-based intermediary. Good afternoon, Alan. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
That's very good, thank you. It's my pleasure to now introduce to our listeners Alan Crabb, who's the co-founder and managing director of BIZTOOls. So, Alan, does BIZTOOls have a preference for the types of industries that companies seeking to raise crowdsourced funding have come from?
Absolutely. I think for me, before even we looked at providing a service through equity crowdfunding, we really looked at, I suppose, what companies are leveraging equity crowdfunding the most. And for us, we realized that it's very much consumer-based companies that are using this as an effective tool to not only raise capital, but also involve people or involve their customers, involve their own networks and community in the process, and inviting these people to be involved directly in the company and have their own stake in the business. So, and we felt that the companies and maybe the approach that we're taking initially with equity crowdfunding is really about providing this service to the companies that will leverage it most, particularly in the early days. So we think that like obviously B2C business companies, brands that are actively selling to consumers, or even providing, like for example, a marketplace between consumers and potentially businesses is a viable way that these companies can, I suppose, build or better engage their own networks and have people invest into their success, which is ultimately what you want from your investors.
Okay. What tips would you give to both accountants and company directors and managers of companies that are thinking about trying to raise capital utilising crowdsourced funding?
So like this is relatively new. So I think the first thing that I would ask first companies or their advisors to do is just to get familiar with the process, also familiar with some of the case studies of the companies that have raised capital. And quite often, the most savvy people that are looking at equity crowdfunding actually reach out directly to these founders or to these small business owners to actually just have a conversation about how it worked, how it was successful for them, and just get some tips and advice from the people that have been successful, or even the people that haven't been able to reach their targets or meet their minimum targets with equity crowdfunding. Typically, you would get the most valuable information from the people that didn't quite back it. So I think my advice is just go to the people that's either the founders or even the advisors that are helping these companies raise capital through equity crowdfunding. I think that's one of the first tips. The other second tip is look at getting familiarized with the regulations around this, particularly if you're an advisor, because this is new regulations. It's new legislation that passed just last year, at the start of last year. There was changes in October for PTY limited companies, and just be familiar with I suppose the latest regulations around this space. So understanding the limitations, for example, being able to raise 5 million per year through this means, any of the eligibility questions around accessing the regime, and also the limitations on investors as well, because ASIC has regulated this specifically, and as their job is to protect retail investors, there is limitations on what these investors can invest, and that's $10,000 in Australia. So I think just familiarize yourself. I think advising a company, particularly if you're getting involved with a company to do an equity raise, just understand the process. Every platform as well has subtle differences in the approach that they take. So better understanding the platforms that are out there. Obviously, do your homework on the platforms and learn and extract as much information from us as a platform, because like we've tried and tested quite a few deals now. We've the platforms that have been operating now for over a year. We've got successes, we've got failures. So we know what works. We also have hopefully refined a process to take a company through, so that we're keeping it, making it as familiar for companies and making that process as seamless as possible. So.
Okay, thank you. Australia was a little behind some of the other countries around the world, the so-called Western countries, in introducing crowdsourced funding for companies. What are your comments on what has happened in those other jurisdictions?
So you can probably tell that my accent's not from Australia. So I've been watching very much the UK markets for equity crowdfunding. I originally started Possible here in Australia, and I obviously looked at that market, the UK market, for reward-based crowdfunding, which is, I suppose, a different model of raising capital through pre-selling, for example. But whenever reward-based crowdfunding was really taking off in Australia and the US, equity crowdfunding was actually being adopted in the UK. So reward never really got the hype that it did in other markets. So I've been watching pretty much equity crowdfunding in the UK since about 2012, 2013, which is actually around the same time as the CAMAC, the advisory group to ASIC, started looking at this as a model for Australia. But I've since learned in the last couple of years that there wasn't legislation in the UK for this stuff, and people were doing it outside of the regulated area. And they had to refine legislation to be able to facilitate it, which is, again, probably going to move faster than changing existing legislation around it. So I've been watching this market. It's been growing phenomenally over particularly the last 3 years. There's I think two dominant players. I would say there's two dominant players in the UK, Crowdcube and Seedrs, and they're full of examples of companies that are using this. Like each platform may have 20 to 30 live deals at any one time. And it will give you a really good picture of, I think, where equity crowdfunding is going to be in Australia in the next few years. So I think the UK, for example, I believe that they may be close to transacting over £200 million in this year alone. So you can clearly see that, without showing you figures, there's definitely been that exponential growth over the last probably 4 years in the volumes, and also the numbers of companies that are actually accessing this, I suppose, new regime or new regulated environment. So it's really, really exciting. I think it's great that we finally got the legislation through. It's taken many, many, many years and many prime ministers to get this legislation through. So I think the regulations are not too bad. Not so good for intermediaries, but really, really, really accessible now for Australian companies, particularly the PTY changes that happened at the end of October last year. So.
Yes, I think the PTY limited changes were a great advancement in Australia. Virtual has 610,000 members on your website. Do you communicate with each of those whenever you list a company on your platform?
So Possible, maybe just going back. So I've been running Possible since 2010. We've hosted, I think, close to 15,000 campaigns, and probably 80% of them being in Australia for reward-based crowdfunding. And we've built that user base up to well over 500,000 now. So Virtual is a sister company as they spun out of Possible, and we've obviously got a rapidly growing database over the last year with the deals that we've done, and it's much smaller size than Possible's network, but we do share across both. We both sit beside each other. So particularly any companies that are advancing from reward-based to equity-based crowdfunding, it's a really good opportunity for us to share the stories of Virtual through the Possible network and inspire the people and the creators in Possible to look at this new regime, to take the next level or to take the next stage of their progression from being potentially a project to being a sustainable or scalable, growable business.
Okay. Do you think that Australian companies that fit the criteria of being proprietary limited companies or small public companies know enough about crowdsource funding?
I think the companies that have been watching the space, watching the development of the regulations and the legislation over the last few years, I think they have a good understanding. Particularly some of the companies that are, I suppose, the equivalents of some UK companies that have access to equity crowdfunding and have grown phenomenally from that model. So particularly maybe some of the more consumer tech companies, they would be pretty savvy with the regulations change, but more generally, absolutely not. Most companies don't know about the previous restrictions for a start in raising capital, and they haven't been aware that some of these changes have come through. I think people that have read about it through some of the startup press, probably at the start of last year, probably read about it, but they're not generally familiar with the changes and how significant these changes are to any company, as any private company, any unlisted public company, as they're looking to raise capital through this channel. So, and like as I mentioned earlier, it's pretty accessible for any private company, even if you're a sizable company with less than $25 million of assets or turnover. They can raise up to $3 million $5 million a year, and not require. Okay, there is a requirement after you raise $3 million to do extra governance, for example, audited accounts, AGMs, and the likes. But up to $3 million, it's really accessible, and it's actually like in my view, it's a great opportunity for any company to, if they're looking to raise capital, to always prepare in a fashion to access retail investors.
Thank you. And what about accountants and business advisors, bookkeepers, who are the key advisors to that group of businesses with turnovers under $25 million? Could they do more? Could they improve their knowledge of how all this works?
Absolutely. So there's maybe pretty boring, but there is detailed guides by ASIC on the regulation changes, particularly the specific details of the regulations, the eligibility, and also familiarizing themselves with what's called the offer document as well is very important. I think this is the key from an advisory perspective, is to ensure that the contents of that offer document meets the minimum requirements from not only a disclosure perspective, but also from a financial perspective as well. So I think just understanding what the minimum requirements are, and also familiarizing themselves with some of the examples that are out there. So we have, I think there's probably about 20 offers have been made publicly, maybe slightly more actually, of offer documents and examples of them for lots of different companies in different industries. And you can get a good picture of what the requirements are. I can also explain that as an intermediary, the early offer documents were reviewed by ASIC. They didn't obviously recommend changes to these documents, but they highlighted things that as an intermediary we needed to consider. And these earlier documents have been through that process, if that makes sense. So, and for an accountant, it may be a good question to ask which ones have, so that they know that they are compliant.
Okay.
Absolutely compliant. Obviously, all offer documents are compliant through as an intermediary. But if they want that extra assurance, we can explain which ones have been reviewed specifically.
Okay, thank you very much. And lastly, can I ask, what's Birchall's unique competitive position in this marketplace?
I think firstly, the approach that we've taken and the experience that the team have. So, like I'm an experienced founder myself. I started Possible back in 2010. When I first realized that equity crowdfunding was going to come through, as a founder, you surround yourself with the best people to execute. And the first thing that we did as a company is involved directly in the business as a co-founder, a lawyer, and Matt came on board close to 3 years ago now, and he's helped us with the licensing. He's helped with setting up the platform and all of the requirements as an intermediary, but also brings to that the knowledge and experience of working with companies and their offer documents from the very earliest stages, so that they're guided, even if the advisor on their end is not quite experienced or qualified enough to do that. We can provide that assurance that or experience that we will look after them. Secondly, I hired actually someone from UK, from one of the big platforms. So that brings someone that has more experience than anyone else in Australia of equity crowdfunding itself, and has seen it grow. Knows the challenges, knows the difficulties from the company perspective, and he actually helps us as a senior campaign manager. And then thirdly, myself, I've been doing crowdfunding for a very long time, I know how to engage people. I know how to build communities. I know how to, from a brand or from a consumer company perspective, be able to engage audiences in a way that hopefully provides them provides companies that insight and data to be able to assess the potential of how much they can raise, and also the potential of the network or the community that you've built after the race has been completed. So, and there's many examples. Like from the possible perspective, we've helped many liquor companies actually excel. One of the earliest liquor companies, for example, was Four Pillars, the gin company. We helped these guys with their first crowdfund back in it must be nearly 5 years ago now. But there's many examples in Possible where we build that community, and that's so powerful, I think, for Australian brands, particularly the ones that want to go outside.
Okay, thanks very much, Alan. Thank you for your time today, and good luck for you and your colleagues in Virtual in the future, as I think we are all going into a very interesting period in Australian small and medium-sized business life, as companies can raise capital as long as they've got the vision and the ideas and the drive to make it all work, which I'm sure you'd agree. So thank
Absolutely,
you for your time today.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can check in as we progress as well. So
yeah,
I look forward to keeping in touch. And
that's right. Yeah, we'll talk to you later on and see how things are going.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure now to introduce you to Arthur Acker. Arthur is the Head of Growth and Operations at Equitize, a Sydney and Auckland intermediary. Good morning, Arthur. How are you today?
Good morning, Peter. I'm very good, and you?
Arthur's the Head of Growth and Operations at Equities, and is going to talk to us about his company's experience in crowdsourced funding. Can you tell us more about equity crowd fundraising in Australia, please, Arthur?
Yes. So first of all, we just say Equitize instead of equity. A few people make the mistake, but that's totally fine. So a bit of background on the legislation in Australia over the past year and so. So legislation for equity crowdfunding first passed in Australia in May 2017, after more than 2 years of consultation and debate. And the first licenses have been issued in January 2018 to companies such as Equitize. To be eligible for retail equity crowdfunding, companies need to have turnover or gross assets of no more than $25 million, and they can raise up to $5 million per year from retail investors through crowdsourced funding platforms such as Equitize. In January 2018, we were one of the first platforms to receive the Australian retail equity crowdfunding license, and on the same day, we launched the first ever retail offer, which went on to raise almost $2.8 million from the crowd. This was for a neobank called Zinja, and just closed a second round for them. And we've raised to date $5 million for them through those 2 rounds. So traditionally, the pre-IPO industry has been reserved for established venture capital funds or sophisticated investors or fund managers. But now we're really opening up this market to investors of all sizes.
Okay, so that's very good. Equitize have got the highest amount of money raised so far by the various intermediaries. What do you attribute this to?
So I think there are a few important things here that we can consider. First of all, we have the most experience in this sector, as Equitize was founded 4 years ago by Chris and Johnny, our 2 managing directors in New Zealand, when the legislation for equity crowdfunding passed there and was not already passed in Australia. And since that, we've helped more than 40 companies raise capital in Australia and New Zealand. We have a very reliable platform that is super easy to use for investors, and we can facilitate investments from individuals, but also companies, self-managed super funds, and trusts. We also have a very large database of active retail and wholesale investors, with whom we share every investment opportunity and we communicate and leverage this network for every deal. We also put a lot of effort in the preparation of every offer to prepare the company for the raise and to get all the key elements in place. And one of the most important points to me is also the fact that at Equitize we have a great team of experts in marketing, technology, and fundraising. We all share a passion for innovation and a determination to make it easier for early stage companies to access capital.
Okay, so what do you think the unique competitive position is for Equitize?
To me, it's really the team that we have at Equitize, as I was just telling you. We have a great team of experts with combined experience across equity capital markets, investment banking, VC, but also in marketing, technology, and user experience. And putting together all these people, we've been able to manage the best raise to date and to help very good companies to raise a large amount of capital from retail investors in Australia. And just another point that I think that is very important is the trust that people have in Equitize. This is a new market, so we really need to build a reputation, first for equity crowdfunding in Australia and for Equitize as a company. And to date, we've seen that Equitize is a very trusted partner for the investors and for the companies which are looking to raise capital. And we really want to stay the best at what we do. And we want to help more businesses out there raise capital and build more brand awareness.
Okay, so that's very interesting, and it's a great overview of what your company does. Is there anything else you want to share with our viewers today? We're going to be presenting this recording to accountants and also to company directors, managers and shareholders of small businesses and medium-sized enterprises. So is there anything else you wish to add in your overview today, please, Arthur?
I just want to say that if anyone is looking at raising capital in Australia, equity crowdfunding is a very powerful tool to raise large amounts of capital, but also to access new customers and to build more brand awareness and to get your brand out there. So if you think that's something that could help the brand, definitely reach out to us. We're more than happy to have a meeting, look at what the company does, and we will assess whether we can help you raise capital through the Equitize platform.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us today, Arthur, and we look forward to talking to you later on this very interesting journey of taking Australian companies through this capital raising process.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you. ESS BIZTOOLS has developed a product package to assist accountants, bookkeepers, business advisors to be able to offer the professional services that clients and prospects who wish to utilise crowdsource funding equity raising can be guided by you. There's training material for your team. There's marketing material that can be used. Quotations and proposals. The big question is your client eligible in the first instance? And secondly, is the client's directors and senior management interested in going down on this journey? Your clients need to appreciate there is a high level of disclosure. This is a virtual prospectus that's been produced. Is your client prepared to proceed, or are they a little bit alarmed at the amount of information that's going to go out into the public sphere? The material includes an overview of the crowdsource funding offer document, which is the de facto prospectus. Identifies the investor categories that apply, retail investors and sophisticated investors. You will be able to have an in-depth discussion with your client on the role of the intermediary. And then it's very important that your client is introduced to a number of the intermediaries so that they can have a discussion with them, find out whether they got empathy with them, and receive their proposals, because under the legislation, the intermediary can discuss an individual deal with an individual client. There's no stipulation in the legislation as to what the fee has to be. So then it's very important that your client is guided on the selection of an appropriate intermediary. Then the important work starts, preparing the crowdsource funding offer document. The offer document is then submitted to the intermediary for review, because the intermediary is both the gatekeeper on behalf of ASIC and also, though, they are the promoter. Because as you've heard from our speakers today, each of these intermediaries have got thousands of people on their database, ranging from around 20,000 up to 610,000 in Birchall's case. They want to be able to send an email to those investors and say, this is a good one. Are you interested in it? And then, of course, the big event occurs. Your client can go live on the intermediary's website. That's for a maximum of 90 days. And then hopefully there's going to be a successful closing of the offer. And then after that, hopefully your concern is what happens post-capital raise. The list of new investors is received. If you were in the Endeavour Brewing Company, you've got 567, I think it was, share certificates to produce. And updating of your share register for the crowdsource funding equity raising, and the lodgement of the return of allotment of shares with ASIC. So for more information, please visit www.essbiztools.com.au, crowdsource funding, learn more, where we've got a whole range of information to assist you to have a better understanding of how the team at ESS BizTools can help you on a better understanding. And what's your investment? What's your fee to get started in this exciting, new, diversified area for accountants, bookkeepers, and business advisors? Only $990, including GST. $900 in effect. And this will give you 24/7 access per office. Or you can subscribe to our ESS BizTools Gold package, which includes every product which we have, 22 other product packages, and full details are available on our website, for an investment of $261.80 per month, $3,141, or you can take advantage of a discount payment upfront of $2,970, including GST. The choice is yours. If you want to talk to us, please contact us. That's our telephone numbers, 1-800-232-088. Or send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. Our websites are www.essbiztools.com.au or www.essbizgrants.com.au to be able to view our government grant identification program. And for small business, www.esssmallbusiness.com.au. I look forward to hearing from you and for your firm joining us on this very exciting journey to assist hundreds of companies in Australia to be able to raise their capital, to expand their business, to get rid of having to borrow money from banks, security required, personal guarantees, and monthly repayments. Thank you for attending this webinar. Have a great day. Goodbye.